folks, how's it going? It's James here. Welcome to another video. I'm going to do a From the Collection video on Bob Dylan. Just give a quick shout out to somebody called Gary Hall, who left a comment on a video of mine recently saying that he wanted me to do a Bob video. So hello Gary, and thank you. So yeah, here it is. I don't have a huge Bob collection. I've got a fair few albums, but I don't have his complete discography. I've got a lot of CDs, but I'm not going to show them. Just going to show the stuff that I have on vinyl. This is the earliest album that I have by Dylan. This is The Times They Are A-Changin'. This record was bought, I'd estimate probably back in the 90s, probably from a charity shop in Leeds, where I was living at the time. And, it's on red CBS. Right, so the next record I've got is a reissue. Now I do remember where I bought this from. I bought this from Manchester. There's a shop there. Is it called the Vinyl Exchange? Bought it many years ago, probably in the late 90s. This is bringing it all back home. Oh yeah, Vinyl Exchange, 18 Oldham Street, Manchester. Still got the sticker on there. It's so helpful to keep the stickers on, I find. I'd already got this record on CD, and I bought the record. It cost me £5. And let's have a look. Okay, it's just on orange CBS. This is a real favourite of mine actually. It's got that classic thing where he kind of carves it up. So you've got side one is all the kind of pile driving, you know, early rock and roll songs, Subterranean Homesick Blues, Maggie's Farm, Outlaw Blues, Bob Dylan's 115th Dream, which is this incredible, just rolling stream of consciousness thing going on. Beautiful ballad, She Belongs to Me. But then on side two, you have the epochal side, Mr. Tambourine Man, Gates of Eden, It's Alright Ma, I'm Only Bleeding, and It's All Over Now Baby Blue. And you can still hear, I mean, I think when you listen to those songs, you can hear the rock map being, you know, redrawn really. I mean, rock music kind of went through the furnaces of Dylan, I always think. It was a furnace, it was a white hot furnace, and, you know, pop and rock music got fed in at one end and it came out of the other in this incredible kind of, you know, day glow, poetic new form that was just all him really, just an absolutely fabulously original artist, and that is a great album, and we all know that cover. Okay, so the next one I have actually is the most recent Dylan purchase. I found this one not so long ago at a record shop in my hometown, Alan Hughes Film Nostalgia and Music, or Music, Film and Nostalgia. Got this as a pair with another album I'm going to show you. Highway 61 Revisited, which really is an extension of bringing it all back home. You know, things got even more long and involved, and this is the album that has that wonderful you know, band performance on it. It's got that big snare crack at the start, which I think Bruce Springsteen described as he said it was like the sound of you know, the door to my mind being kicked open or something like that. You know, it's got all that kind of very crackly, trebly Mike Bloomfield guitar, and Al Cooper on keyboards as well, of course. Like a Rolling Stone, Tombstone Blues, you know, Ballad of Thin Man, which is Dylan's great kind of sarcastic pop at Straight Society. Wonderful stuff. And then on side two, I suppose the standout track for me would be Desolation Row, one of the earliest examples, or one of the early examples of a song where Dylan just writes stanza after stanza after stanza after stanza, and you can't quite believe it's just going to go on, just kind of rolling on and on and on. Just, yeah, I mean, an absolutely timeless album, one of those ones which you kind of have to have in your collection if you're at all interested in just the evolution of pop music and rock music. I first heard that on CD, and it was the summer of 1991. I can picture myself exactly. I know exactly where I was. I was in Edinburgh at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. I was a student in a student production, and I took this with me on CD, and I tried to get to grips with it during the course of that week, and it didn't work for me at all. You know, I had a Sonny Discman. I was trying to get into that album. It was many years before it clicked. Okay, so we're going to go chronological for a while now, and this I bought this from Cobb Records, which is a little record shop in West Wales. If you haven't seen the video I made about that, check it out. I'll link somewhere. This is Blonde on Blonde, obviously, and it's not in the best shape, this one, as you'll see as I'll kind of open it. It's falling apart at the seams, but it's the only copy I've ever actually found in all my years of record collecting, so you know, maybe one day I'll find a better copy of it. It has the wonderful gatefold, whoops, and yeah, what do I need to say about this record really? It's just an astonishing tour de force of poetry and I almost said psychedelic rock there. That's not quite right, is it? It's not psychedelic, but it's very stream of consciousness, and the songs seem to come from a very organic place. I think it was a time when he was probably taking loads of amphetamines and he was kind of just writing at a typewriter and just splurging all this stuff out. It's got one of my favourite Dylan tracks on it, which is Visions of Joanna, which contains the wonderful, well, there's several bits of lyrics on there that I like. Lights flicker in the opposite loft, the country music station plays soft, but there's really nothing to turn off, which I love. And then jewels and binoculars hang from the neck of the mule, is it? On the same song. And the ghost of electricity howls in the bones of her face. You know, I mean, he was really taking lyrics somewhere where they'd absolutely never been before. And again, you've got lots of songs which go on and on. You've got Memphis Blues again, which just goes on and on and on. You've got some great rockers, you know, Leopard Skin, Pillbox Hat, really great group performances. I love the way on these Dylan records where you can sort of hear that the band don't quite know what they're supposed to be doing. You know, on Visions of Joanna, you know, the bass player keeps changing on at the wrong point, because Dylan would add, you know, bars, and he would add half phrases here and there, and nobody ever quite knew what he was doing. And he was so uncommunicative in the studio, he would never quite explain what people were supposed to be doing. So the performances just have this very seat of the pants kind of feel to them. And then of course on this record you have the absolutely monumental Sad-Eyed Lady of the Lowlands, which is just another one of those, it's almost kind of James Joycean in its sheer, just epic scale. So yeah, Blonde on Blonde, falling apart at the seams, I'm afraid, but another cornerstone record. This, I think, was also bought, yeah, in the Vinyl Exchange in Manchester. This is John Wesley Harding. Now this is one of the few Dylan albums actually which I did really love, pretty much on first listen. I think it was because I was already kind of up and running with Dylan by then. I had it on CD originally. And it's a very stripped down album, of course, very austere sounding. It was after his accident, after his motorbike accident, and I think he was trying to withdraw from the responsibility of, you know, being poet of a generation and a spokesman and a political visionary, and he just wanted to, although I mean this album actually does contain some incredibly beautiful visionary lyrical poetry, but it's very kind of Old Testament. It's not really acid inspired anymore. It seems to be coming from a much older place, and you know, really literary. You've got these songs, I Dreamt I Saw St. Augustine, which is very mysterious, very strange narratives which don't quite hang together. You're not quite sure what's going on. A classic example will be the Ballad of Frankie Lane and Judas Priest, where it almost builds to a punchline, but you're not quite sure of what's been happening, and it's difficult to grasp why he's telling you the story that he's trying to tell you and what it actually means. But I suppose that's kind of part of the fun of it. There's two big standout tracks for me on this record. One is All Along the Watchtower, which I knew from years ago, you know, from the Jimi Hendrix version, so it's quite a shock to hear it in its original acoustic form. And then you've got I'll Be Your Baby Tonight at the end, which is another one of those very sweet and happy sounding Dylan tunes. You know, Dylan has this kind of monumental reputation for having written these really important, you know, significant songs, but I often like his, you know, his kind of lighter side. You know, the miniatures and just the small songs that you think, you know, that probably didn't take him too long to write. And because he was coming from a tradition all the time, you know, he was rooted all the time in these very old song structures. You know, he'd work through all the country stuff and the blues, you know, Robert Johnson, and he was able to find little twists on reasonably generic material actually, And I find that some of the Bob songs I like best are the ones where you just think, yeah, he's kind of just taken an old form here, you know, an old song form or an old stanza form. He's put a little bit of Bob in there and he's turned it into something which is uniquely him, but it's not necessarily a kind of big 12-minute epic. It's just a sort of small bijou Bob. So this, I suppose, is what I'm talking about, Nashville Skyline. This is a reissue that I bought maybe 2 years ago, an album which I knew about. I'd had it on CD for many years. A very short album. I think at the time it was seen as being a bit of a disappointment. People were not quite sure how to take it, because again, it seemed like he kind of lowered the bar. He'd had the bar set kind of up here somewhere, you know, in the 60s, and then he'd had this accident. He came back with John Wesley Harding, which still had that very enigmatic quality. But then on this record, he just seemed to be heading in just a very, very straightforward pop country direction. But what I love about this record is just the playing on it. I mean, what a great band. Kenny Buttry, who's one of my favourite ever session drummers. He's on Harvest as well by Neil Young. You've got Charles McCoy, Pete Drake, of course. You know, you're talking country royalty, Norman Blake, Charlie Daniels, and then you've got a guest appearance by Johnny Cash as well. An absolutely delightful album. My favourite song on this is the final song, Tonight I'll Be Staying Here With You, which is just absolutely beautiful. But then on side one, you've got that absolutely heartbreaking song, I Threw It All Away, which you know, is just absolutely just a work of genius. So a short and sweet album, one that I'm inordinately fond of, and in fact it's the only Dylan album that I actually went out and bought a reissue of, so that must mean something. Okay, we have a bit of a gap now, and this next album I actually have two copies of this. This is Planet Waves. Planet Waves. I bought the second one hoping to send it on as VCLT, but it was just too crackly. It was this one. I did my best, I cleaned it up, I tried everything I could, but I could not eliminate the crackle, so I decided to keep hold of it. I don't like to sing records which are just a blaze of bacon and eggs, but my original version is good, it's fine. On the beautiful pink rim eyelid label. And I think this is one of Dylan's most underrated records, to be honest with you. It's the one that has the band on it, and I think it's just got, again, a bit like Nashville Skyline. It's not his most ambitious work, but it just contains some really sweet songs. You've got, let's see what we've got, Hazel, which is just the kind of song which you could learn on the guitar if you'd only been playing a couple of weeks, you know. Two versions of Forever Young, and then you've got On a Night Like This, which is the opening track. There's some great guitar work on this record from Robbie Robertson, and it has a kind of slightly ragged, primitive, in the barn kind of feel, which is, you know, clearly is the band's trademark. So yeah, not an album which gets a huge amount of attention, but one that I do really enjoy. So that is Planet Waves. Okay, so this is the other album I bought just this year as a pair with Highway 61. This is Blood on the Tracks, also bought from my hometown. And again, a record I had on CD for many years, knew it back to front, and probably my favourite Dylan album. I know lots of people say that. It has a certain atmosphere to it. The gestation of the record obviously was very complicated. You know, he kind of started the album with one group of musicians in New York, and then you know, he wasn't happy with some of the tracks, so he went to a different studio and re-recorded, and it turned into a bit of a mishmash. But it's amazing how well it works. It's got some of his more kind of emotionally naked material, fantastic, intense performance, and it's just on the orange CBS. And yeah, I mean, clearly a high watermark for him. Tangled Up in Blue, you know, Simple Twist of Fate, Shelter from the Storm. I don't need to say too much about this, just one of the all-time great rock albums, and possibly the greatest singer-songwriter album ever, I think. So yeah, Blood on the Tracks, masterpiece. Then we have a record which is, to me, is not in the same league, I don't think, as Blood on the Tracks. I know some people put this higher when they do their lists. I personally don't think it's as good, but it is a great album. Hurricane, Isis, Mozambique, One More Cup of Coffee, you know, Sarah. Don't get me wrong, some great classics on here. It's another relationship album. It's another one where, you know, Dylan is coming apart at the seams emotionally. And it's got a great sound to it as well, actually. It doesn't seem quite as sophisticated as Blood on the Tracks, but you know, that kind of just adds to its charm, really. Desire. Right, this next one slept in my collection for many years. This is Street Legal, bought from Oxfam 2005, the date on there, for 99p. And I think I listened to it at the time and enjoyed it, put it away, didn't think anything more of it, and then I saw, I think it was John Heaton on the VC reviewing the album, and he was saying it was a great album. So I dug my CD out and I put it onto my iPod, and I went on holiday for a week and lived with it for a week, and I was knocked out by it. But it has this very vibrant sound, you know, the drum kit sounds great. It sounds like they've found a really great room to record in, and they've managed to capture the ambient sound. It just has a very full sound to it. You know, I mean, Dylan made some dodgy records going into the 80s. This is 1978, but I mean, to me, there's no sort of hint of that coming yet. Everything still sounds quite classic. And some great lyrics on this record. Changing of the Guards, Is Your Love in Vain, which is a beautiful Dylan song. Yeah, okay, you know, maybe not, you know, one of his all-time best albums, but very far from being one of his worst as well. But this one does actually stand up a lot for me. Okay, so next we have Slow Train Coming, which is a record that I didn't buy for years and years because I knew it came from his Born Again Christian phase, and I was a bit concerned that Dylan was going to go a bit preachy and po-faced, so I didn't buy it. And then I saw this copy. It's not in the best shape. I bought this a couple of years ago, Oxfam, £2.99, and I was really knocked out by this record. I think it's got a great kind of bluesy sound. It's produced by Jerry Wexler, and it has the horns on it. Precious Angel is just a great, it just rolls on, and it's just got that kind of Atlantic sound to it with the horns, just wonderful. But my favourite track on this album actually is When You're Gonna Wake Up, which is has all that kind of bluesy organ, is it, or maybe a Rhodes piano, not sure which. But the great thing about this record actually is the guitar playing of Mark Knopfler, which kind of weaves its way through the record, and it doesn't make it sound like a Dire Straits album exactly, but it is unmistakably him, and he plays that, you know, that way he has of playing very kind of twangy bluesy guitar, which is just all him, and he really makes a really major significant contribution to the record, and I'd say this is probably in my top 5 Dylan records, which is, like I said, because I kind of avoided buying it for so long. That kind of does take me by surprise, but there you go. That's the joy of record collecting, isn't it? When you finally buy something that you were not convinced you were going to like, and you're knocked out by it. This was VCLT recently from Steve, Psych and the Valleys. I'd mentioned in the video that I didn't have a copy of Oh Mercy. He said he'd found one. It was in really nice condition, so he sent it to me. This was the first Dylan album I ever owned. I had it on vinyl back in the day. I lost my copy of it. And it's got that great Daniel Lanois ambience to it. It's in places it sounds almost tropical. It's got a kind of hot, claustrophobic feel to it. You can almost hear the you know, the crickets in the grass. It has that late night on the bio kind of ambience to it. It's got some really kind of soft bluesy songs. When it starts, actually, it starts with the song Political World, which sounds to me like the Talking Heads. It's almost got that kind of David Byrne, Brian Eno groove to it. It's really textured. It's a really textured album, the way that all the guitars are layered, and it's got a great sense of space to it, you know, the way it's mixed. Dylan did write about this record quite extensively in his Chronicles book, and there's some quite interesting stuff in there about how he came to write the songs. Quite difficult stuff to understand, actually. He claimed to have discovered a new style of songwriting, or a new method of songwriting, but it's difficult. When you read his explanation, it's actually quite difficult to understand where he's coming from. But it's certainly made for a great album. My favourite track on this record is Everything Is Broken, which has a great kind of R&B groove to it. Probably the best album that Dylan made in the 80s. And then he followed it with an album which was absolutely critically reviled at the time. And I didn't buy it at the time because I think the reviews were so poor. And then I bought it on CD a while ago, and I really enjoy this record. This is Under the Red Sky, which I think came out in 1990. It was mainly slagged off because the lyrics are very much back of the fag packet kind of affairs, you know, and you don't really expect that with Dylan. It's difficult to understand why somebody as great as him, you know, with lyrics, should write stuff which sounds like it was just tossed off in 5 minutes. A great example is the opening track, Wiggle Wiggle, which the critics panned that song mercilessly. But what I didn't realise was that that track is just a short, it's like a 2-minute song right at the start of the album, so it can almost pass for just a kind of little prologue or a preamble. It does not sit in the middle of the album as this great big, you know, terrible song. It's just a quick song, and then we get into the album, and you know, most of the songs are just decent pop rock songs, and they kind of showcase what I love about Dylan, which is the way that he could depart from the kind of bluesy structures, and he could write really beautiful melodic you know, pop songs, really. Stuff like Under the Red Sky and Born in Time. They're songs which are almost cheesy. They've almost got a bit of schmaltz to them, but he always manages to pull it back from the edge, you know. And what is great about this record, again, is the band performances. I'm not sure who the band were, but it has a very bright, energetic kind of sound. Stevie Ray Vaughan is on the album, Jimmy Vaughan is on there, David Lindley, Don Was on bass. In fact, was this album produced by Don Was? Maybe it was. Maybe it was. Yeah, it was produced by Don Was and Jack Frost. Yeah, so to me, nothing like as bad as the critics made out at the time, an album that I am fond of. And then, of course, after this, he had a big you know, career renaissance. It kind of happened gradually. There were some covers albums, and then he made Time Out of Mind. And ever since then, he's kind of moved into a new, well, not new, but he's been doing it for a while now. But he's moved into the latter part of his career now, and he's doing stuff which is critically adored, and you know, everybody loves it. But unfortunately, my vinyl collection stops in 1990 with Under the Red Sky. So there we go. I brought us up to date. So thank you very much to Gary Hall once again for asking me to do the video. It's one that I'd been meaning to do for ages, but sometimes you just need somebody to pop up and say, why don't you do that, to actually spur you on to do it. So now I've done it, and I hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you soon, folks. Take care. Bye bye.